Hey everybody, Jake here at TrendSpider to go over the weekend video into really the first full week of December and really the last month of the trading year. So let's jump right into it, looking at the broad market, some crypto, and then some individual names. This will be a little bit of a shorter video because a lot of the market and the charts really are based on what happens going into the next week, which is very uncertain. You could get some weird news over the weekend. So this is definitely a news-driven market right now, with the variant kind of being an excuse for the market to move down, as well as the Fed kind of coming out a little more hawkish this week. That definitely didn't help, especially when you've got bad news and then you don't have a ton of liquidity below to absorb that selling pressure from the news. That's when you get some interesting sell-offs like we had over the last week and a half. So let's jump right into it on SPY. You can see here on SPY, just using the anchored VWAP, I have about a 0.9% offset here. And remember, the way I choose the offset is simply looking at this previous area here. So this is your original anchored VWAP. The fact that we did hit this low point here on October 6th, that's where I want to create another kind of VWAP offset. And you can see here how well the price action has respected that offset over the last several days into the second half of this week. And so all in all, we are holding this area for now. And you can see here on the weekly chart, I have this trend zone created, and you can see that we did move down to this point. I highlighted it in orange-yellow, whatever color that is to you, to really show a sign of caution. There's no indication that we're going to bounce here, but we did close within this area, so at least we can circle it and kind of have it as an orange circle instead of these green circles, which did confirm bottoms and bounces from those points in the past. So all in all, we are at this long-term level to look at on the trend zone side of things. Short-term, we're at this anchored VWAP from the October low, and we'll have to see what happens going into the week ahead. And this is kind of common across the board. On the Qs, you have very similar price action here. From the October low, you can see that the offset's a little different. Why? Well, because notice these candles did not break down as much as SPY did. So this is about, what offset is this? I think this is a 0.5% offset. So you can see a little less from the 0.9 that we had on SPY. But you can see all in all, we did hold this anchored VWAP almost right at it today from this October low. And I remember I do these on Friday, so that's when I say today, I meant on Friday. And a really ugly candle. You pretty much got an outside bar and an engulfing candle, engulfing almost the whole body of Thursday's candle, barely missing it. But all in all, not an incredibly strong candle. You know, if I were to be a betting man, I'd say maybe we get an inside bar on Monday, but we'll just have to see how that plays out. Now, on the weekly side of things, we do have this longer term trend here, pretty much starting from July of 2020. You can see we have quite a few data points here using the trend zone rather than just the trend line. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This would be the sixth time if we continue to move down to test this area. So all in all, we did have a continuation down after last week's really big outside and engulfing candle. And we did try to move up about halfway through that candle and before we reversed and continued to hit new lows towards the end of the week. So all in all, kind of looking like SPY, where you've got this long-term trend zone holding up for now, and you've got the October low anchored VWAP holding. Now on IWM, this thing has been absolutely just brutal. I mean, look at that. Pretty much we thought we were finally breaking out, and the market had other plans for us. And so what's interesting is notice that we moved right down to this diagonal support zone that has acted as support, multiple times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be the fifth time if we did hold here. And that is to be seen, and price action will tell us if that's the case. But for now, we did close right at this area where we have had bounces in the past on the daily. And then on the weekly, I thought this was interesting. So pretty much since the 2016 bottom on the weekly chart, this was a really important bottom. 2016 was really when the Fed said they were going to raise rates and they didn't. And that was kind of the bottom that was put in for the year, really early in the year in January of 2016. But you'll notice here, I went back and I looked, and there's only been 4 instances where we had 4 red weeks in a row. So if we zoom in here, this was the 4th red weekly close in a row, and you can see there's 4 other times that has happened. One of them we had a pretty much perfect bottom and a continuation and a really strong move up to new highs after that. That's shown by number 1. 2, we moved down, bounced for 1 week, and then continued down, and overall into 2018 just continued down from there. 3 was back in 2019. We had a pullback, a nice bounce, and then kind of chopped around for the rest of the year. And then 4 was your COVID low or your COVID drop, and then you did hit new lows the week after. So statistically speaking, interesting information, but is it information you can use? Well, that's about a 50-50 shot. So, that's you can't really do a ton with that. But one thing I'd mention is just the fact that we are still holding this previous resistance zone, or support zone on the daily. And if we do just kind of draw a horizontal level here, you are still holding a lot of these previous lows. And so all in all, until these break, this is still just consolidation and an option seller's dream. So let's go into Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are really going to be your main risk on, risk off things to look at really the rest of the year. I mean, this is something that really started tanking intraday Bitcoin, and this brought the markets down with it. And so you can see here that we did break down through this medium term support zone. So that's not incredibly bullish here. But you can also see on the weekly, we are looking very similar to SPY and the Qs, where we've got this trend zone here that we've tested multiple times. We're right back at it. Remember, Bitcoin closes on Sunday, so this still has time to play out. But for now, it is holding. But if you remember, we were talking about this Williams percent range divergence. So if I turn on the Williams percent range 8, remember for me at least, when I'm using the percent range, I'm using it generally as a function of 2. So if I'm looking at the weekly, I'm using the 8 because I want to look back 2 months. So there's 8 weeks and 2 months. That's why I'm looking back. If I'm using the daily, I'm using the 10 because I want to look back 2 weeks. Well, for crypto, you could use the 14 because there's 7 trading days. But for equities, I use the 10 because you're looking back 2 weeks, and that's 5 trading days in a week times 2. That's 10. So that's kind of where these numbers come from. So we are using the Williams percent 8 to look back about 2 months here. And you'll see here that the divergence is starting to play out. And notice that we're finally starting to get to this point where we are getting oversold where we did in the past. But notice last time that happened, we actually continued to drift down and move lower. And so, will that be the case? We'll just have to see. But all in all, not the strongest price action going into the weekend so far. But the main thing is we're holding that uptrend for now. Now, if we do continue down, this is where you'd want to just anchor a VWAP from this low. And this VWAP is right around 47,900, 48,000 or so. Notice it's not perfect. You're going to have some price action around this area like we saw in September. So I'd say 47,500 would be an area to watch below if this thing really does start tanking into the weekend. So that is Bitcoin. Ethereum's the next one that we'll look at, which is holding up a lot better. And if you look at Ethereum here, you've seen this chart before, and the reason we're looking at it again is because it's still relevant. These previous resistance areas back in September have acted as support multiple times since the breakout in October, and we're right back down to this area. Bounced a little bit, but for the most part, this is a very just volatile chart, bouncing off these previous resistance and previous support zones. And for now, it is holding as support, so we can call it support until until we break down, and then not so much. So if we anchor a VWAP from this low, you can notice that the VWAP is right at this previous support zone. So around 3,900 would be an area to watch if we do continue down into the weekend. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is the weekly candle, which is really interesting. So we are at this long-term support zone, very similar to what we saw in Bitcoin, SPY, the Qs. And we have this previous all-time high resistance here that I drew highlighted in red. And so you kind of had confluence of both the support zone and the previous resistance zone acting as support last week. We got a bounce, but now we're not looking so hot. So by the time we start next week, this chart could be completely different. So keep an eye on the weekly chart, and we'll see what happens. But definitely want to keep an eye around on the weekly side, at least right around this area here. So that is right around 38.75. But the main area at first would be this previous resistance right around 3,900. And then this is when you start getting into these longer term levels around 3,850 or so, shown by this orange horizontal line. So all in all, that is something to definitely keep in mind for crypto. That is going to be your risk on, risk off sentiment and really liquidity indicator for the markets. And for now, not looking incredibly strong, but we are holding these important areas on the daily chart. Next, we will look at some individual names, starting with PayPal, everybody's favorite, which is always a little scary if everybody's loving this stock. But one thing that I'm seeing here that's interesting is I have this V drawn, and by no means does that mean we're going to have a same type of V reversal like we did back in March, which is shown by this point here. But notice that we are just absolutely, we've gotten wrecked over the last 7 weeks or so. I mean, if you look at the weekly chart, and I'll add the volume by price here from the COVID low, you'll see that we have had now 7 red weeks in a row, about a 34% move to the downside, right down to this volume shelf. And we're actually below the point of control. That's why I have this volume shelf area highlighted in yellow rather than green, because we're below the point of control. This is acting as supply, and it will going into next week. So this would be the textbook area to reverse. And if it doesn't, things could definitely get a little iffy here. You don't have a lot of price action below to even look at. I mean, I guess you could draw an area here, which is these previous lows right around, let's say, what is that? Right around 165 or so. So if we wanted to highlight this 165 to, let's say, around 170 or so, so that would be your next level to watch if we do continue to break down into next week. Now, as I mentioned, this V could happen. It may not happen. I just highlighted it because I thought, it's interesting how steep of a drop we've had, and it's actually makes the COVID drop look like a joke. So will we get the reversal? We'll have to see, but you can see that we have had some of these V reversals over the last few years, and the V reversal does reverse pretty quickly, and you do get some really strong moves to the upside. So if it happens, great. If it doesn't, we highlighted the longer term levels around 165 to 170 below to keep an eye on. Going into the next one, if you thought PayPal looked bad, then you're going to really love Baba. This thing is down 65% in the last 13 or so months. Absolutely brutal, and there's no signs of this letting up. I mean, not only do you have the delisting potential, but you also have tax loss selling coming into effect. A lot of these long-term holders are just saying, all right, I'm out, I'm taking my loss, and I'm offsetting, my gains elsewhere. And if you look at the weekly chart, this is where it really gets interesting. You broke this 2018 support this week, and I think a lot of people thought this previous level of support from 2018 would act as a bounce zone, but we literally just knifed right through it and we continued down. So, I mean, this is a really, really ugly chart, and I mean, I don't even know if technicals play into this stock at this point, because you just have so much uncertainty around the delisting. You've got the tax loss selling going on. But if this were to bounce, these are your previous highs here from 2015 and then 2016, highlighted in this orange area here. So we can change this from 2018 support to around 2016 support, and we'll have to see if that holds. But all in all, Baba, just an absolute waterfall over the last year. Next one is Apple, and this one actually was green for the week, which is shocking. But you can see here the main thing that I'm looking at is this previous low here from November. This is where I want to anchor the VWAP. This is kind of the pivot. And you can see that we've bounced off this area multiple times. So if you follow my cursor here, you can see by this red line, 1, 2, 3, 3 times over the last month, we've really bounced pretty well here. And so we actually hit a higher low on the daily on Friday, which is definitely something to keep in mind. But if you look at the weekly chart, this is when it gets a little interesting. One, you've got this previous resistance zone that is once again acting as resistance. Two, you've got the wick this week, which is a prime candidate for turning on the raindrop chart to see what was really going on within this wick. So if we turn on the raindrop, you'll see that one, it was actually a red raindrop. So you have divergence. You had a green close for the week, but you have a red raindrop, meaning that the volume weighted average price during the second half of the week was lower than the first. And then two, notice what we have at the top of the range here. Not a lot of volume. So anytime you have a lack of volume within that wick, that's always a sign that there wasn't a lot of conviction by buyers up here when the price did move up. Yeah, this moved up on pretty low liquidity, and then as soon as selling started to come in, there were no buyers there to really keep the price up. And so that's never a great sign, but all in all, you did have some relative strength here on Apple. So if you haven't used the raindrops or you don't use them, this is the time you want to use them. When you have a wick, and especially if you have a green candle with a wick, you want to turn on the raindrop and see what's going on in there. Now, the next one that we'll go over is Amazon. Amazon did not have a very strong week either, but you had a couple different areas where the price did bounce. One is this previous resistance zone. So going back pretty much since July, you can see you've got one, you've got two. Let's get a couple more, 3, 4. Finally broke out here. And so, this is now acting as a potential support zone. It's not support until it proves itself as support. We'd really need to bounce hard off of this next week. But all in all, you pretty much have an SR flip here. You've got the previous resistance acting as now a level of potential support. Now, on the weekly side, you can see we have the March lows here, which is where I'm anchoring the VWAP. This is kind of your capitulation point before we hit these new higher lows. And you can see that we're bouncing right at it. We did close above it this week. That's something to keep in mind. And for those that are having trouble kind of following my cursor, good news, we will have a cursor highlighter where you'll be able to follow my cursor a lot better. So for those that have requested this, we're listening to you, and I promise it's coming. Just need to work with the production team to get that going for next week. And I will be on vacation next week, so the weekend video will likely come Saturday evening. So just keep in mind that going into next weekend. So all in all, on Amazon, we are bouncing where we need to be, but notice that this has not necessarily been a perfect area in the past. We've kind of traded around this area almost like a line of best fit, and for now, it's holding above the March low anchored VWAP, and that's really all we can tell. Last one that we'll look at is Disney. This one has also been absolutely wrecked over the last 4 weeks, but you do have some promise. You do have a little bit of a hammer here. I'd like to see that body a little smaller. You can see that it is still above 50% of the range. The body is, but I would have loved to see a close, let's say right around here. That would have been right around 147.50 or so. But all in all, you can see that with these wicks, the selling momentum may be starting to reverse here. And same thing here. You can see on Disney, we do have a lot of V reversals, and this is one where you kind of have not as big of a sell-off as COVID, but it's a pretty strong sell-off. I mean, from the highs, Disney is down about 30% or so in about 8 months. So really tough here to figure out, is this just a short-term pivot before we move up? Because technically we do have higher lows from the March close, the March lows and from COVID, but all in all, it's hard to say. We just have to take price action into account. We can't predict anything. We can say, yeah, sure, that looks like these previous Vs, but this V here is just to show that what may happen. And one thing that I would really say is a pretty strong thing about Disney is notice these higher lows. So we definitely hit new lows on SPY, but you can see we actually hit these higher lows here on Disney over the last 3 days. From Wednesday to Thursday, we did have higher or Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we had higher lows. And if you look at some of the previous times we've dropped, some of these previous Vs here, notice we had a pretty similar candle here. So if I make this a little bigger and just look at the daily chart, you'll see that we will never really go straight up. You'll have a bottoming candle, and then you'll have some some pretty big pullbacks, but then you'll slowly grind higher. Now, will that be the case? You had it here as well. Notice we bottomed here in January, had a big candle, pulled back, and then continued to move up. We'll just have to see if that's what kind of happens this time around. But if we do turn on the gap snake, you'll see we do have a huge gap above. Who knows when that's going to fill? But a lot of the time, price does like to gravitate back up towards these areas. And remember, you can always create alerts on these gap zones. So you can just create an alert if you want to be alerted when the price starts to pretty much close into the gap and start filling the gap. Use the breakthrough trigger. Whenever the price breaks through that lower line, you'll be alerted. Or if you just want to be alerted anytime the price gets around this gap, you can use the sensitivity feature, and that will allow you to know, okay, we're getting close with that gap to the upside. So all in all, hopefully this video is helpful. There's a ton of different things you can use on TrendSpider, especially in this type of market to get an edge and make the whole process of looking at the market more efficient. This is definitely the time you want to start looking at gaps. Are there more gaps to fill below? The gap snake is a great way to use that. So you can see here, technically on Disney, we still have gaps below. We have a gap below that's around 128. So that would be the area to fill below if we can't hold here, and we'll just see how it plays out. Now, if you guys do want to check this out and just try it out, we do have that 7-day free trial where you can sign up without having to pay anything, and we do have the customer support team to give you a one-on-one demo if you'd like to give the platform a shot while you're on the trial. And let's say you try it out for a few days, write down a couple questions, have your one-on-one demo, and the team will be happy to answer all the questions you have. So if you do like these videos, please like and subscribe. As I mentioned, for those that do have a little trouble following the cursor, hopefully going forward, I'll have something like this essentially. So every time I move my cursor, you'll kind of see it. And that will hopefully be coming in the next weekend video. Everybody have a great weekend. Remember, you always need to decompress from the markets. If you had a bad week, don't think about it all weekend. That's not going to help you into the week ahead. Just forget about the markets, enjoy the next 2 days, and then when it comes to Sunday night, get back to the charts and study, and you'll be more prepared for the week ahead. So everybody have a great weekend, and thanks for watching.